Hi, let me read you a few stories about Nasruddin. Nasruddin found himself ravenously hungry one evening when he sat down for dinner. With both hands he started to fill his mouth with food from all the dishes as soon as his wife Fatima set them down on the table. Of course, proper etiquette in those days was to eat with the first two fingers and the thumb of the right hand only. Astonished at Nasruddin's boorish table manners, she asked, "Why are you eating with two hands?" Nasruddin replied between huge chunks of food, "Because I don't have three." Every Friday on market day, Nasruddin arrived at market with an excellent donkey, which he sold almost immediately, for his prices were far below the usual asking price. One day Musa asked him, "I cannot for the life of me understand how you do it, Nasruddin. I sell my animals at the lowest possible prices. My servants force farmers to feed me fodder for free. Give me fodder for free. My slaves look after my donkeys without wages, and yet I cannot match your prices. How do you do it?" "Simple," replied Nasruddin. "You steal fodder and labor. I merely steal donkeys." One time Nasruddin was leading his ass across a steep ravine when the donkey lost her footing and tumbled down the side of the mountain. Nasruddin recounted the untimely and gruesome demise of his beloved donkey to the wags at the tea house, remarking with damp eyes, "She took off decently, and true she didn't fly all that well, but it wasn't a bad effort. It was clearly her landing that needed the most improvement." A wise but haughty pundit, who had arrived to debate Nasruddin, arrived at the mullah's home while everyone was out. He knocked and knocked at Nasruddin's gate, but nobody answered the door. Infuriated, he picked up a piece of chalk and scrawled the word "fool" on the gate. As soon as the mullah returned home, he saw the graffiti. He rushed to the philosopher's house. "I forgot our appointment," explained Nasruddin, "and I apologize for not being home when you called. Naturally, I recalled our meeting just as soon as I saw that you had signed your name on my gate." Once there was a serious water shortage in Aksahir, and the town council called on Nasruddin because water divining was one of the things Nasruddin did for work. Instead of procuring a divining rod, however, the first thing he did was to go home and wash his shirt. Someone asked him what he was doing. Nasruddin wrung out his shirt, carried it outside, and hung it in the backyard on the clothesline. "It is not the washing of laundry that causes rain," Nasruddin said. "Every fool knows that it always rains only when one is hanging laundry outside to dry." A rich Persian was in the tea house and was talking about tremendous palaces built in his home of Isfahan. He said one of the Shah's palaces is 50 kilometers square with at least 200 rooms. "That's nothing," Nasruddin said. "You should see the palace the Sultan has built for us in Kanya. Far more magnificent in every way. In fact, one palace covers an area of 500 kilometers by..." Just right then, a fellow that Nasruddin knew from Kanya walked in the tea house. Everyone was hanging on Nasruddin's next words. "By 15 meters, Nasruddin finished, mumbling in his beard. "But Nasruddin, that's impossible," said the first visitor. "How do you fit that width to that length?" "It would have fit much better if this fellow from Kanya, who knew the actual dimensions of the Sultan's palace there, hadn't just entered right now." As folks were bragging around the tea house, they spoke about the famous people they knew. Nasruddin had just finished for a trip and said, "On my trip to the capital, the king stood right in front of me and spoke 5 words I shall never forget." "My goodness, Nasruddin," remarked Ali. "That must have been something profound he said to you. What great words of wisdom did the king speak?" "Get out of my way." So where's the next one? Once Nasruddin's brother Salim was visiting. "Brother, I hear that you have some fine 40-year-old vinegar. I need a small quantity to prepare some medicine. Would you give me some?" "Don't be ridiculous," said the mullah. "If I give out some of my precious vinegar to anyone who asks, do you think there would be even a single drop left for me?" Nasruddin was greatly pleased with a lunch of liver that was prepared for him at his friend Hussein's house. So much they requested the recipe from his wife, Sitare, to bring home to Fatima in hopes she would prepare the dish. With the recipe written on a slip of paper, Nasruddin returned home, stopping on his way at the butcher's where he ordered 3 kilos of fine, fresh liver. Tucking the recipe safely in the pocket of his baggy pants, swinging the parcel of liver wrapped in paper and string, Nasruddin hurried home. Suddenly, while Nasruddin was occupied with thoughts of another fine dish of delicious liver, a large buzzard swooped down, snatched the parcel in its beak, and flew off with it. Nasruddin ran after the bird for a few steps, then realized the futility of trying to chase it. Still, Nasruddin was not about to let the buzzard have the last word. "Go ahead and take the liver then, you fool. But it won't do you any good. I still have the recipe." One time, Hussein admired Nasruddin's silver pinky ring and said, "Nasruddin, please give me a ring so that every time I see my finger, I shall remember you." The mullah replied, "I most certainly will not give you my ring, but be comforted, for you'll still have something to remember me by." Hussein replied, "Oh, what is that?" "From now on, Hussein Effendi, every time you look at your finger, you shall recall what I have not given you." One of Nasruddin's students asked, "It is said that the hawk lives 6 months as a male and then 6 months as a female. Mullah, is that true?" Nasruddin stroked his long white beard and replied, "In order to know, you must become a hawk for a year and a day." Nasruddin nervously commented to Aga the barber, "I might not have much hair on the top of my head nowadays, but I used to have to shave 30 times a day." Aga nearly dropped his razor. "That's freakish," he said. "Oh, not really," replied Nasruddin. "You see, I used to work at a barber shop myself." Once when he encountered the doctor Barak at the tea house, Nasruddin once confessed to nearly constant amnesia. "My worst fault is that I cannot remember anything." Barak asked, "Tell me, Nasruddin, when did this start?" "When did what start?" said the mullah. "When did your amnesia start?" answered Barak. "I had amnesia?" Nasruddin chimed in, "Ali, didn't you tell us you took a memory improvement correspondence course last month? How did that go?" "I'm definitely improving. Now I can usually remember that I have forgotten something." Once Nasruddin was leaving his home, leading his little grey donkey Karakan, when his neighbor Farik asked, "Where are you going, Mullah?" "I am going to ride to the capital to take the king's highway." "Eh?" said Farik with a raised eyebrow. "Well, you might best leave your donkey at home. There are robbers on the road, and they might steal your ass." Nasruddin said, "There are likely as many bandits around my house who would steal it from my stable as there are on the road, so I think it's best to take my donkey with me." Farid, concerned for Nasruddin's safety, gave him a good sword with which to protect himself. On a desolate stretch of road, a scruffy, scraggly fellow approached, and Nasruddin thought, "This fellow's a ruffian. I'd best find some way to placate him." The traveler, who was a ragged mendicant, returning home from a lengthy pilgrimage, had raised his hand and was about to offer a friendly greeting when Nasruddin shrieked in fear, "Please, just take the sword and leave my donkey and me in peace." The fellow, surprised and delighted with his good fortune, agreeably took the sword and continued along his way. "That was a close one," said Nasruddin, as he continued on his trip. When Nasruddin returned home, Farik inquired how the journey went.